Hey everybody, these old cameras that we love and cherish, they're being a little bit deceptive. And that's all about these dials that tell us the shutter speeds. The speeds you see on here, back in the day when they were brand new, was more of a suggestion than reality. And after 50 years or so, it's even worse than that. The lubricants have gummed up, and quite often when you set, like on this little Rollei, if I set this to 1/60th of a second, it's possible that it might be actually shooting 1/40th of a second, or even slower. So you need to know what the reality is. If you're not going to have it CLA'd and all of that, at least when you want to go out shooting with your camera and you want to have fun, you want to know what the reality is. So how can you measure your shutter speeds accurately? Well, I'm going to show you the device I use. It's a well-built device. It does exactly what it says on the tin. And after I show you how to use it, I'll demonstrate it on a few cameras. I will also show you the little fixture I use to attach the light source to the lens, and I'll provide the files for 3D printing that for free. If you hang out to the end, I'll show you how to make a spreadsheet where you can take all the numbers that came from the shutter tester and calculate how many f-stops of an error you have in your shutter speeds. And that's a whole lot better than just percentages or something like that, because if you have percentages, then you got to kind of use Kentucky windage when you're cheating your aperture to make up for the overexposure caused by slow shutter speeds. But if you know the f-stops of error, let's just say you have one f-stop error in your shutter speeds, you can then, when you go to shoot, you can take the aperture and close it down by one f-stop, and you know everything's going to be okay. This is a Mamiya C220. It's a beautiful twin lens reflex camera. This was my very first medium format film camera. In fact, this was my very first film camera in the new millennium. I'd had film cameras when I was younger, but this is my first one I got when I got back into film last year. And I spent quite some time trying to figure out how to measure the shutter speed on this camera so that I could tell if it was accurate. And I tried all kinds of, I made a video about it, and it's kind of a silly video because I took like a GoPro and I took my iPhone and I used high frame rates to try and capture the shutter in the act. The thing is, with a camera like a GoPro or an iPhone, you're just not going to be able to get enough frames to make a proper assessment of your shutter speed. So I went down the rabbit hole of thinking about designing a device that would do this. And there was more to this than meets the eye at the beginning. It just starts getting more complicated the more you think about it. So I decided to finally buy a device that was made by somebody that has already solved all the problems and knows what they're doing. So I bought this. This is the VF Moto. I always get that wrong. I want to say VM Photo. No, it's VF Moto shutter tester. This is made by a guy in Romania. He's been doing these for years. You'll see VF Moto shutter testers popping up here and there in videos back for quite some time. And he has all kinds of cool features in this. You can turn it on and you see it's got menus with things like the different the curtains and testing different things like that. You've got Hasselblad lens only, there's diaphragm, there's focal, there's everything on this, things which I know nothing about. I use this solely for leaf shutters, and that's what I'm going to demonstrate today. The cool thing about this is the guy did all the work. You just buy it and start measuring your shutter speeds. Word of warning, the guy who sells these, again, he's in Romania, and if you buy one, you buy them from VF Moto on eBay. If you buy one, you might want to get it shipped with one of the more expensive options. Go with like, I don't know, DHL or something like that. There's multiple handoffs that happen between the Romanian post office and the US post office, and boxes get lost in corners of warehouses and they don't crop up for weeks or something like that. With mine, this disappeared for, I don't know, 6 weeks or something like that. It was gone for quite some time. And I finally canceled the order. And then the day after I canceled the order, this cool looking package with Romanian postage stamps shows up on my front porch. I was happy and annoyed. Happy because I got my shutter tester finally. Annoyed because I already canceled the order. The guy refunded my money, and so we worked it out. And if that ever happens to you, make sure you pay the seller. eBay has washed their hands of the deal. The refunds happened. eBay will not reopen or anything like that. Ask them to send you a PayPal bill or something. That's what I did. When you go to find one of these, make sure you get all the features you want. He sells many models with features that each one adds a price, like the sensor for the focal plane shutter and the curtains and stuff. Each one of those sensors and the gadgets adds extra cost, so you only want to get the ones you need. All right, well, let's get to it. Let me show you how this works up close and personal. What we have here is a few typical specimens that I want to know what their shutter speeds are like. This is a Rollei 35T. We have the Mamiya 6 automat in the middle, and then over here this is the Mamiya lenses, one of the Mamiya lenses for twin lens reflex. This will work on the C220 and the C330 and their brethren. And in fact, this is the one I'm going to start demonstrating on because it's a really nice little self-contained unit. So let's get these extra cameras out of the way and start off by showing how to test the shutter on this Mamiya 80mm twin lens reflex lens. It's nice because this one you can take out of the camera and fire the shutter. There's no need to open the camera up like that. You simply you have access to the back. That's pretty nice. This is the shutter tester we're going to be using. It's a little black box and it has a few jacks on the side and some buttons. This one I purchased with a few options, but the option I use is strictly for leaf shutters. So we're going to use a light source, plug that in, light source, and a sensor. Plug that in. And this is the sensor that you're going to use. You have to use a light source because if you think about it, when you're pondering designing your own shutter tester, you run into problems because a lot of modern lights use LEDs and they dim them by using pulse width modulation. And you'll end up with flickering from the LED lights being interpreted by your shutter tester as the shutter speed. And you don't want that. This comes with its own constant light source, and you're going to shine that into the lens, and you're going to use the sensor behind the lens. The way that I shine this in the lens, the seller recommends possibly sacrificing a lens cap, drilling a hole in and gluing it in place. My preference is to actually create these little caps. I 3D print them, and I will share the file for making these. And I just measure the outside diameter of what I want to put the cap on and print a cap for it. So this one was designed specifically for these Mamiya lenses. And let me put the cap on. There we go. Okay, now we're going to put the constant light source in that hole. And it gives us multiple options. Again, I only use this for doing a leaf shutter tests. So I'm going to press the OK for shutter test, and it has multiple options here. I'm going to choose leaf. Cock the shutter and set it to something maybe a 1/60th of a second, and fire the shutter. And it says to increase the light level. So let's increase the light level. You do that by pressing the little buttons on the side. It's set to, we'll set it to level 10. Fire the shutter, and decrease light level. And you have to go through this a little bit. And there, once the tester is happy with the light level you've chosen, it'll tell you that the test is accurate. And I'll typically do a couple tests. And you see, this is showing this is shooting at 1/40th of a second. It tells you the time in microseconds, and then it tells you 1/40th of a second. And I had actually set it at 1/60th, so we know that this particular shutter is shooting 1/60th at 1/40th of a second. Let's try something like 1/250th, see what that does. And our 1/250th is actually 1/212th. So that is how you use it. This little sensor has this weird cross arrangement. That is for handling the curtains in a focal plane shutter. So you can get the leading and trailing curtain. And I don't use that. So this little toggle switch, which controls which of the side lights to use or side sensors to use, if you put it in this position, it's going to use the wide ones, and if you put it in that position, it's going to use the narrow ones. I put it in the middle. That means it's only using the center sensor, because that's all you need for a leaf shutter. Let me show this to you on other cameras. So here we go with the Rollei 35T, one of the most elegant cameras ever made. This is beautiful. Let's see what its shutter speeds are like. So I made a cap that fits over this outer pair of wings here, and that slides right on like so, and we put our light source right in that there, so it's going in the center of the lens. With the Rollei 35, I'm going to have to take the back off. Do that. Flip down the pressure plate, and now I have to hold this sensor right on the film plane. So this starts getting more challenging as we get away from those nice Mamiya TLR cameras. And 1/33 of a second. Let's see what we actually set. We had it set at 1/30th. Let's try 1/60th. Do 1/60th of a second. And cock the shutter. There, 1/72nd. Let's do 1/250th. See what this little Rollei does at 1/250th of a second. And you'll notice when you're waving this thing around, it'll start showing you nonsense numbers. There, 1/312th. That's the 1/250th. So there you go. On the Rollei, it's showing the shutter speeds are very close to being spot on. I'm not going to worry about them on this camera. Now let's look at the Mamiya 6 Automat and see how its shutter speeds are. I have, again, a special cap that I printed for this one. Now we're going to have to do the same thing we did with the Rollei. Lift the lever up, open the back, and we're going to take the pressure plate out. 1/61st of a second. So the 1/100th of a second setting on this lens is consistently shooting at about 1/60th of a second. And we can go to, let me just increase this to 1/250th. 1/175. 1/192. I'm seeing some shutter service in my future. I'm probably going to be opening this one up and getting everything all clean and all the grease out of there. But you can see how easy it is to do testing of a shutter on a camera like this. Let me show you one more trick with this shutter tester. So let's go back to the Mamiya TLR lens. Now we're going to put a compact flash card in the slot on the side of the tester. What that's going to do is it's going to capture the data as we run our tests. And 500. I'll try that again, 370. Okay. Now that we've done that, we can take the compact flash card and load the numbers onto the computer. I already downloaded the file from an earlier run onto my Mac, and you could see this is actually what the file looks like. You'll see entries that say shutter and then these numbers, and those are simply microseconds. And you can take this and copy it and paste it into a spreadsheet. I'm using numbers. You could use Excel, of course, and you can do whatever you want with those numbers. The fancier features of the shutter tester, such as this shutter and curtain test with a focal plane shutter, those will provide more data points, though you'll get multiple columns of data. But the basic leaf shutter test produces nothing more than a list of timings in microseconds. And over here, I made a spreadsheet where I pasted in these timings in microseconds, and you can see that in the pink on the left. And then I put in labels for what I actually had done. So I wrote down half second, quarter, eighth, 15th, and so on. And then I have another column where I calculated the actual seconds, just dividing by 1,000,000. And then I did another column where I put the expected values, basically the calculated value of a quarter, and here a 30th. And then I calculated the f-stop error, and this is the column that's most interesting. The shutter tester doesn't do this for you. You would want to do this in a spreadsheet. And the way you calculate the f-stop error is you take your real time, divide that by the expected time, and then divide that all by the square root of 2. This is going to give you how many f-stops slow your shutter is. In this case, this is the Mamiya one, this particular shutter right here. This was showing up as more or less 1 stop slow all across the board. What this means is if I want to compensate for 1 stop of overexposure, I can stop down the aperture by 1 stop. That's the whole point of using f-stops for the error rather than just seconds or percentage or something like that. If I'm shooting and my light meter says I need to be using, say, f11 and 1/125th of a second, I could go to f16 and 1/125th of a second, and that will account for this 1 f-stop error in exposure. That's really all there is to say about that. You can do this calculation for all your cameras, and then you will know what reality is and whether you care about actually fixing it or, like this one, can you live with it? Many people will be happy with a shutter that is 1 stop slow. In fact, a lot of people like to shoot 1 stop slow, so it's not a big deal. This is the free CAD model I made for the shutter tester cap. That's these caps right here. It's pretty simple, and what I do is I simply change the spreadsheet which comes with the model, and I go in here and type in different values. This one is the Mamiya 6 shutter tester, the one I just did recently, and I would put into filter outside diameter and measure that with a caliper, put it in there, whatever unit you want. Just make sure you type the unit, so you can put that in millimeters. It'll still work. And the rest of this, you can leave be. If you want, you can twiddle with it, but the most important one is just to adjust the filter OD to match whatever lens you have so that this outside diameter of the filter will fit inside the cap. I'm going to share this on my printable site, as well as several of the pre-made files. So you can print them yourself or you can have them printed. So there you have it. The shutter tester from VF Moto in Romania is the bee's knees. This thing really works. This one is an older model. The one he sells now is more advanced and has something I like, which is USB-C with an internal battery. No, this uses a 9-volt. But hey, if you want something that really works for measuring your shutter speeds, grab one of these. You'll be happy. So that's all I've got for you today. Thank you for watching. Now go out and shoot a roll.